Welcome to another crossover episode between Red Inca and England on 99.94. Today we have Rory on, mostly because we're talking about a player from the North, but also because of the most fun fact that I know, that Harry Brook was born in the same hospital as Rory Dollard's son. And if that isn't a perfect way, you must know everything about Harry Brook. You're basically his biographer, from what I can tell.
I know everything about my son. That's where I'd like to start, and I know a bit less about Harry Brook, but yeah, I've got a personal vested interest in Harry Brook because my son, who's 7 years old, loves his cricket, has latched onto this fella because he feels there's some cosmic link between them, and my son Arthur calls himself and Harry Brook the Keithley boys because the official Keithley isn't actually where Harry Brook's from or where my son is from, but it's the official address of the Airedale Hospital. And whenever, I took him to a couple of 100 games to see the Superchargers, and every time Harry Brook walked out to bat, my son punched the air and went, Keithley boy.
Well, if it makes you feel better, my son is very excited that there is a Zach that plays for England. Unfortunately, every single time he's gone to watch him, you know what's happened. It's about 4 balls later and he's driving on the up. So Harry Brook seems to be doing slightly better for Arthur than Zach is doing for Zachariah. But I got you on partly because I obviously know who Harry Brook is. I remember Goffey, before, I think it might have been even before he took the job, but certainly when he took the job, was like, Jarrod, you've got to spend time watching this Harry Brook. This whole year, I feel like everyone in English cricket's been talking about this guy. And if there was a hype train, I don't know when it started, but I wasn't invited, or I was playing with my phone as the train stopped. Everyone else got on and it went on. So when did you start really hearing about Harry Brook?
Well, he was the under-19 captain in the England under-19 captain in about 2018. And so you immediately you scan those names, don't you? And you have a look at the under-19
Rory Hamilton Brown of his time.
Yeah, I suppose so. It looks like he's got a bit more legs on him than that, and one fewer surname, has to be said. But so he was the captain of the under-19 side, so clearly expected to be something. Now, the first time I saw him in the flesh, I went down to Headingley. It was early season, so I wasn't involved with England. I thought, have a look at this Brook guy. He might be something. Absolutely nothing happened of interest whatsoever. I recall almost nothing of the innings other than I'd intended to write about him and there was nothing to say. So, file that one back in the back burner. And that's kind of where he lived for a couple of years, on the back burner. Now, clearly Yorkshire knew that there was a player there, a serious player, and people who were exposed to him for a bit of a longer time had plenty of faith in him, but he didn't get that big talk, that kind of Ollie Pope talk that we all knew about Ollie Pope very, very early, and we've never stopped hearing about Ollie Pope since. And Brook didn't have that kind of chat. He was under the radar a wee bit, bubbling under, and then only about, I don't know, 18 months probably, he's been really looking like the real deal. But what an 18 months, I mean, this is a guy who's debuted in, first class debut 2016 as a sixth former. And to this day, he's only got 7 first class centuries, and he's got 3 of them this year, plus another one against South Africa.
Yeah, they were supposed, that's not like a non-official first class game.
Yeah, that just because they use more than 11 players. So, but looking at that bowling attack, that's a proper century. You can take that one to the bank.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Just go back to the Yorkshire angle of, they played when he was a teenager, but it's actually been a really common thing for Yorkshire cricket over the last few years to play a lot of teenagers. Who was the wicketkeeper? Was it Barney Gibson?
Barney Reid? Barney Gibson, yeah. There was...
He went on to manage a Tiger, and then he was 15, and then there was Matthew Fisher. Didn't he play as a teenager as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, young teenager, 16 probably, I think, as well.
I feel like I'm missing someone else obvious as well. So it's been a bit of a thing for them to push really young players for a while.
Yeah.
And I would say it's had very mixed results. I mean, the Tiger manager obviously went on to great things, but it does feel like it's probably burnt out a couple of guys really early on, where they've been picking them almost at academy players to play first 11 cricket.
Yeah, well, they do. If there's anything that we know about Yorkshire cricket, it's that they don't like to reverse on an instinct or a hunch that they have, or a belief that they're tied to. So if they say,
I don't know what you're talking about.
If they say this kid's a player, they are duty bound to shove him all the way into the first team just so they're not proved to be wrong. So there is a sense that they do push hard, but sink or swim is not it's not something I would advise with my Keithley boy upstairs. I won't be throwing him in the water and see if he can swim. But on a sporting level, sometimes it works.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for if you have a player who's of above average talent already, that it might actually affect their development if you hold them back. But we've obviously, from international cricket, from the litany of players who played when they were too young, it obviously can go one way or the other. So if you only have so many young players of talent available to you, you're probably better off not pushing them into sink or swim. But if you have lots, and to be fair, as we've already said, Yorkshire have tried this with quite a few players now. Maybe the odd Tiger manager is worth it if you end up with, an England opening bowler or, a middle order player. So it does make sense. He's from Burleigh Cricket Club. Did I get that right?
Burleigh and Wharfdale. Yeah.
Is that a well-known cricket club? Is that a hot spot?
I mean, it's not a feeder. It's not a big talk club. That isn't where he's from. Another reason I like Harry Brook is that he feels like proper salt of the earth, right? My kind of guy. Absolutely. It's a local cricket club. If you go on their play cricket page, sort of the stats engine or whatever, and you go and you look on Burleigh and Wharfdale Cricket Club right now, there's 2 or 3 Brooks listed in the officers. There's the first team captain is a Brook, the secretary is a Brook. His gran lives. She can field the balls that get hit for 6 and throw them back over the boundary. This is not a. It's a good club clearly, and it's got a vibe and a bit of quality there, but it's not a super pro feeder club. Doesn't appear to be what that club is there for. It's not its reason for existence. It's a cricket club, and he happened to be affiliated to it.
It's funny that you mentioned all those. I found an interview with him where he basically said, they said, what did you do as a kid? And he was just like, I was in the nets the whole time. But he was in the nets with his dad. I can't remember if he has any brothers or sisters, but I remember him mentioning his uncles, and maybe his maybe his grandfather as well. Yeah. And so
it's a proper deal.
Yeah, and so it felt like everyone was in the nets the whole time, and it didn't feel like, I remember Ed Cowan, his dad saying, I was in the nets the whole time with Ed, and then what he meant was I was throwing balls to Ed the whole time. You read Harry Brooks thing and you get feeling he actually spent a little time bowling to his uncles, and like it was
fielding.
Literally everyone was in the nets and he happened to be there the whole time. So it does feel like as you said, a more less a Zach Crawley situation where he was targeted to be trained in certain things, and more just the guy liked cricket. And when you read into his story, he wasn't, and I suppose even when you look at him play, he's not what I'm trying to say this in the friendliest possible way.
Yeah, good.
He doesn't quite look like a professional athlete. Like if he was walking down the street, I don't think you'd go, that guy, he's got a bit of swag to him. He probably plays professional sport. He looks a little bit like he's running late to be an apprentice real estate agent. And when you read the early stories on him, he wasn't particularly fit at all. He was in fact, he got held back a little bit in his cricket because he was overweight. He doesn't radiate as a professional athlete the way that I suppose someone like Jimmy Anderson, who has a similar background in some ways, would.
So I think you can differentiate, can't you, between the athletes who've chosen cricket and the cricketers who find a way to become athletic.
Yes.
And he appears to be, to all intents and purposes, and it goes back to his family situation, the fact that he grew up at a proper sort of spit and sawdust, proper like village cricket club. He's a cricketer, and he's become what he needs to be. And you mentioned he was carrying a bit of weight. That is what I hear whenever you ask anyone about the young Harry Brook. They go, yeah, he was fantastic. He was really, really good. We always knew he was good. Was he ready to make a job of it, make a lifestyle of it? That was up for grabs. That didn't seem to be certain. He gets the scholarship to Sedbergh School in Cumbria, and the switch flicks, as far as I can tell. And it seems to me that he was already in the Yorkshire system. He was good enough to be recognised and identified, but they said to him, "It's not working out. You know, you need to be a bit of a different person next time you come back here." And I spoke to somebody who was involved in the academy system with him, and he said he came back one year, he'd grown a little bit, he'd put a couple of inches on, he'd shed a bit, he was looking a bit more like it, but then he started running, and he was like, well, the guy said to me actually, he said he was more Farah compared to the rest of us. He said Harry just started running and he never stopped.
Yeah.
And at Sedbergh School, he got involved in fell running and, up and down bogs and puddles and nasty mornings, and he really made a commitment to that stuff. And he so basically Harry Brook, I guess, decided that he was a cricketer and he wanted to become an athlete.
So in basketball, they talk about athletes and then they talk about real hoopers. And I think Harry Brook would be, I don't know how we invent a real hooper phrase in cricket, but that's essentially what we're saying is, you
could have a hula hooper in the 100, couldn't you?
Yeah, well, they probably would have. The other thing he did early on is it seemed like there was a big jump, and we see this with a lot of English cricketers when they play professionally in Australia. And he went and played at University of New South Wales, which, Greg Matthews, Henry Lawson, Ed Cowan, who we mentioned before, like a lot. It's a real good place. It seemed for him, again, that playing for your wage is probably what he needed to do. There's no doubt he loved the game, but there's a big difference, isn't there, between loving cricket and playing with your uncles in the nets and making it into a job. And him becoming, a fitness freak is one angle of it. The other angle is probably fine-tuning his game. And it does feel that he probably, I don't want to say he needed to kick up the bum because that's maybe the wrong way of looking at it, but he probably needed that fresh cup of coffee to be like, oh, this is actually what you are, what is expected of you when you're a professional player. And perhaps that changed the way he did it without him ever losing. And some people lose that sort of boyish love that they have for the game. But for him, it feels like to me that the two sort of fused together sometime after he went and played in New South Wales. And that seems to be the big jump for him professionally when he comes back to England.
Yeah, and I suppose it's kind of fitting that it was a university team that he played grade cricket, because it maybe performed that role that university, if it is done right, and it's not always done right, and it's not always achieves what it's supposed to for people. But it was that bridge between youthful talent or affinity for something, and then becoming a little bit more serious and being out on your own and actually finding your way to make it work for you and seeing where it's going to take you next. So although it was a university cricket team, it sort of almost was a university experience, I guess, for Harry Brook in that sense. But I gather he liked to crack open a beer as well while he was over there.
There's no doubt he enjoyed himself in the interviews I saw as well. Yeah. Stylistically, because I suppose he's played a little bit of PSL. Did he play Big Bash as well? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, for Hobart,
so he's played a little bit, but most people in the world probably still haven't seen much of him, right? He hasn't played a lot of international cricket. He hasn't played a lot of IPL yet. Stylistically, he's quite tall. I sort of, I did a bit of research, went through and I saw a couple of people talk about him as KP because he's tall, because he's leg side, because he has a lot of power. And I think I can see that comparison. But what he is he's KP if KP came through 7 or 8 years later, because he also has the scoops and all the other stuff, whereas KP was almost all down the ground, right? Yeah. Whereas Harry Brook has that side of him, and he has behind the wicket and the scoops and the improvisations and all those sorts of things. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as KP, but he has that ability to get on top of the bounce, which means that he can basically drive almost anything on the up, and which means he can launch balls down the ground. But then he can play a reverse sweep. I reckon most of the boundaries I saw when I was looking for highlights of him on the offside were reverse shots rather than normal shots. Well, and then he's either going straight or he's going out to the leg side.
Well, he's in Pakistan. He was hitting these absolute dream shots over extra cover. He genuinely, there doesn't seem to be a safe landing spot. He's got a shot for everything. Now, listen, it's sport. It's not a computer program, so he's going to mess up sometimes. But there isn't a safe spot. I'm pretty sure there's not a safe place to bowl to Harry Brook because
Well, if you bowl
he,
wide outside of stump, and because of the strength that he has and the quickness that he has,
yeah,
extra cover. I'll give you extra cover. I don't think he goes very much between backward point and cover.
I think he can, you know.
Oh no, I'm sure he can. But what I mean is,
he would need a bit of pace on the ball probably for that.
Yeah, but I don't think that necessarily matters anyway because he can clear everything else.
Yeah.
So it's not, and no one in international cricket is going to bowl without a deep cover anyway, right? Because any player is going, not Dom Sibley is going to push the ball there, right? So
there's an interesting thing with Brook though as well, and it is he's got this. I guess he's got this little trigger in white ball cricket more so than I think what we'd probably see in test matches. But he steps away to leg to manufacture the shot he wants. And you see people follow him. They go, they have the playbook in their head and they go, man steps away to leg. So you've got two options. You follow him down leg and he has the easiest little pickup shot that he just rolls it and it's 6 every time. Or they hang it outside wide, and he's got a long enough reach that he accesses extra cover. So when he starts to shuffle and he takes the initiative by moving away to leg, the two things that the guys are taught, here's my response to that. He's worked out an answer to. He's ahead of the game, and I think people are still working out what they're going to do there because I think the 7 matches in Pakistan will be poured over quite a lot. Because he used a lot of his tricks and they worked by and large very well. So there'll be a response. That's the next thing when the analysts get the claws into him. But the fact that he can reverse and lap over his head and he now this is a bugbear of mine. I'm quite sure it is of yours. The people who produce these shots when the field is not correct for those shots. And they're just doing it because it's a shot that they have practiced in the nets and they've got it. They have it. They have it in the arsenal. They haven't used it yet today. Here it is. And then they flip it to short third man or whatever because he's there. Brook, as far as I can tell, plays the shot when the field is asking him to. So it's pretty smart way that he cycles through his options, as far as I can tell. And to hear Nasser Hussain sort of waxing lyrical about him these last few weeks, he doesn't give that stuff away too early, Hussain, generally. He's got a good track record and he doesn't tend to row in behind someone he doesn't think is going to go pretty well. And he's gone fairly hard on Harry Brook.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's many holes with him. As you said, that whole trigger movement thing, that pickup leg shot on the move is the kind of shot that you see a lot of good T20 play, average T20 players have a shot like that, right? But that's their shot.
Yeah.
So I can't remember who it was. There was a guy in the Big Bash for years, and it was really obvious. And as long as you didn't follow him, he couldn't play anything else. Whereas in Harry Brook's case, that's one extra way that he is putting you off and almost trying to buy a boundary. But if there's no, he doesn't need to do that. He can stand in his crease, or he can flip the ball over the shoulder, or he can reverse it, and all those sorts of things. He's really interesting from that point of view. The other thing is, we've talked about the fact that he has many shots in many different directions. He also scores runs in all formats, right? So we see Liam Livingstone coming into the test squad for England. And I'm sure you and Dan will do, a 7-part series on how weird that is. But essentially,
we've done the first part already, actually.
Oh, there you go. I'm sorry, I haven't listened to that one yet. But realistically, Harry Brook has actually proved himself in all formats, which it seems to be happening less and less with young cricketers.
Yeah. I mean, he's got the game, and he's using it. Really, he's from a part of the world where he's going to value Test cricket financially, emotionally, historically. He understands, he gets it. That's part of the bag. He's really good at the white ball stuff, and he finds it a lot of fun, as far as I can tell. He seems to have a great ball with it, and he's at the age of 23, whatever. He's been out to Pakistan. He beat the England senior team out to Pakistan. He's one of those guys. He went over to Hobart. And he appears to be really level. He appears to travel well, if that makes sense. Like, he doesn't appear to be too frustrated by this stuff. It's early days. These things can get on top of you, but he appears to be pretty open. Like, I thought it was great in the Pakistan series just gone. where I think it was like game 1 or game 2. He was interviewed after. 23-year-old lad from 10 miles up the road from where I'm talking to you now, Burley and Wharfdale Cricket Club. And they said, "Oh, how was it out there?" Maybe it was mid innings or whatever, and they were talking about the chase. And he said, "Oh, typical Pakistan wicket, really." You know? And he just reeled off. He's like, "Well, yeah, he's gonna two pace. You want to get on top of the bounce." He just reeled it off that it was as a man of his experience at 23 years old, it was pretty much the kind of wicket he expected in Karachi. And I thought that's fantastic.
I also love that because obviously he's played in the PSL, but for most of his life, there was no cricket in Pakistan for him to even watch.
Yeah,
Like he literally grew up in a Pakistan, and then I've watched some on TV. I was in the nets a bit in the PSL. I played some games. Come to me, and
that's
I'll
what
tell
I
you
came out here to expect. Yeah,
yeah. So something else I found interesting about him is that we see England. I mean, England have no batters, right? Like even now, Alex Lees hasn't got a contract, which I did hear you talk about on England on 99.94. So we don't have to relitigate that. But we've seen in recent times Hamid, Crawley, Pope all rushed into the side well before they were proven, well before they were ready. Sometimes not even in the roles, just because it was like they were a fresh body who can bat. The interesting thing is that because he developed slightly slower and was never I know he's the under-19 captain, but
yeah,
it wasn't like Hamid or Pope or Crawley. There didn't seem to be that kind of buzz about him in the same way. He's been able to develop himself as a professional, as we've talked about, playing league cricket, playing club cricket overseas, getting to know his game. He gets into international cricket when he's 22, 23, which is still young enough. It's a good age to start as an international batter, but not, I don't know what my game is and I don't know what I'm doing here in, the way that it seems to be for Hamid and Crawley specifically, or in Pope's case of, oh, I've made it to international cricket and now they're going to make me do a thing I don't know how to do. It does seem that Brook has been given out of those four, the best possible case to succeed where the others maybe not so much.
Yeah, so from that under-19 team, he was the captain. Will Jacks was maybe the star. Don't know. Brook
He was the one that was
good.
talked up, I reckon, the most.
Yeah, but Jacks because he was at Surrey. There was a really good chance that he was going to get shouted for, right? So he got shouted from the rooftops. He's really good as well, as it turns out. The first player out of that under-19 team to get senior recognition was Tom Banton. So Brook's he's not behind schedule by any means. He's bang on schedule. But of that team, kind of Jack's got the big talk. Banton got the early shot. And we arrive here a couple of years down the line, and Brook's actually looking like the one who's going to make it stick. Now, whether the fact that he wasn't pushed super early, whether that is a stroke of luck that he ended up opening the batting for Yorkshire early doors and it didn't go very well, maybe that's it. Because maybe if he comes in at 19 at number 5 and scores a load of runs, they do push the button on him. But what he did was he opened the batting because that's where the spot was. He was the guy in the academy team or whatever who was next in line. They were the one. He was the one they needed to get in the team, like we were talking about, rushing guys in, and it was up the order at the top, and it didn't really work out very well. So that probably held him back, I guess. He needed to rebuild some numbers, and there is a sense that his actual first class record, as you look at it now, is slightly skewed by the fact that if you take out his numbers opening, I know this is probably get called out for root maths here, but if you take out his numbers opening in arguably a position he shouldn't have been batting, it maybe looks a bit different again. So maybe he had a few bumps in the road early doors in that regard, and it might have given him a little bit of a slow road. I mean, he's played 50 odd first class matches now. That's about right, isn't it? That's where you want someone to be coming in to the England side with that.
No, definitely.
He's got a bit of feel for his game. He knows what it is. Knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I think if he is a 10-year player, right, and
easily, yeah.
And I don't think I've seen enough of him to make that call yet, right? I remember seeing Joe Root in his first test going on ESPN and just going, well, this guy's a 10-year player. Sometimes you can tell and sometimes you can't. With Steve Smith, I was like, he should never be in the team again. Why is he being chosen?
Unless he learns some more jokes.
Yeah. So, when it comes to that, it's like it actually whether he is that player or not will probably define how successful he has been. But when you do look at it, so I'm just having a look now. In 10 matches opening the batting, he averaged 14, right, in first-class cricket. And he averaged 22 batting at number 3 and 31 at number 4. He really had to be pushed down the order before it worked out. Now, some of that might just be maturity as well, right? That isn't root mass. That really is finding the right role for that player. And he was in a position that didn't particularly work. But again, there's a part of me that if you're going to pick someone who's 22, 23 when they're coming into the side, the biggest problem that you have, I would call it like the Michael Clark rule. Michael Clark came into the test team and was like, I never want to be dropped. Well, settle down, Sham. I mean, you just got in the side. Let's worry about the first 2 or 3 years here.
Yeah.
And it ended up frying Michael Clark's brain, so much so that he was dropped and he had to be dropped. And then he came back and he was a much better player. I think Harry Brooks already struggled through the worst part of, well, maybe the worst part of his career is wrong, but he's already struggled through a major part in his career. So he knows how to struggle and he knows how to succeed and he's found a position. I just feel a lot more confident in a player that has managed to do that at a young age than I might have someone who's 22 and, first year he averaged 40 and the next year he averaged 45 and the next year he averaged 50. This is a guy who's really worked it out.
So listen, there's a red flag here as well, though, because England have already, I don't know if they've talked about it, but it has been tossed around the studios that maybe the way to get Harry Brook into the team, they said that he got into the team end of last summer because Johnny Bairstow got injured. So he got in exactly the place he wanted. Like the spot that he had his eyes trained upon magically appeared. Prior to that, he'd been travelling around as 12th man the entire time with the team. And people were going, Lees ain't getting many runs, Crawley ain't getting many runs. This guy's opened the batting before, so maybe that's how we get him in. Massive red flag. He has opened the batting before, and it was not good. So I would be so wary of burning what you've got in Harry Brook by filling the next vacancy that comes up at the top of the order and saying, well, he's good. He's opened the batting. He literally has done it, because it looks like it might be a really, really good way of burning a big asset.
Yeah, I mean, there could be a part of the Shane Watson principle here, which is Shane Watson's numbers look better when he opened the batting than anywhere else. But it was also happened to be the bit where he completely worked out his career and worked out his batting, came back into the team feeling really confident and smashed the ball everywhere. I think if he batted at 5 or 6, it might just be that when Harry Brook was trying to work out red ball cricket, maybe if he batted at number 5, he still would have been rubbish. Probably wouldn't have averaged 14, but he might still have been rubbish. So I do think there's a part of that. The problem is that unless Bairstow keeps and bats at 5, or Brook bats at 5 and Bairstow moves back to 7, I'm not sure how you actually fit him in there. What about the white ball teams? Where does he fit into the white ball teams, do you think?
I think he sits at that 5. I think he slots into Owen Morgan's seat. I think that's the seat that got vacated, and that's what he jumps into. And I think he ultimately puts pressure on Moeen Ali. And I don't know when the end comes for Moeen, but it might be sooner than we think. Don't know. Because if Livingston can pick up the overs, Brook might pick up the batting. And listen, Moeen's lovely, super player, super influence, but that might be where the tension comes. It could be that Brook has to play if he continues on this trajectory, and that Moeen really needs to fight his corner against Brook as a batter, purely as a batter, because Livingston is there on hand to toss in the overs that Moeen has bowled, and he's bowling less than he has done in the past. So, I mean, I think he should play this T20 World Cup in the 5 slot, and I don't see any reason to shift him out of there. I think it'll be a natural home, and in a format, certainly in T20s. I mean, 50 overs is hard to tell because England have just tossed it off really at this point, and as the world has to some extent.
In a month and a half's time, everyone's going to care about them again, but at the moment, it just doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, it's not on the radar really, but. If you look at people and where their stock is, and where's Roy at, and where's Stokes has retired from 50 overs, Morgan's gone. I don't think there's such a queue of traffic that he can't get into that team. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think his flexibility in T20 cricket is batting 4-2-6, if that makes sense, because 4 and 6 are very different positions. But I've seen a lot more of him in T20 cricket than I probably have in anything else. And I think he has the ability and the game to go up the position when you need someone at 4 and also bat at 6. My last question is, Ben Stokes called him dumb. And I don't think he meant it as an insult. And I don't know. I got the feeling what he meant was Harry Brook is uncomplicated. The ball comes down and Harry Brook hits it. And then after the game, Harry Brook is happy that he's played well or sad that he's played bad. But he kind of keeps a level keel. That's how I read the thing, but I'm not from the north. I don't know how you guys talk about each other up there.
No, genuinely, I think it's. I suspect it was pure endearment. I think, honestly, I think the unspoken part of that from Ben Stokes might have been Harry's a bit dumb. Brackets like me.
I think he might have even said like me in the interview.
Yeah. It's. I just think it's uncomplicated. I think it means he's not this guy who is drowning in hinterland, for want of a better word, and I think that is said with nothing but love. And Stokes had his eyes opened by Brook in that very, very, very brief period of time he spent with Northern Superchargers the previous year. He came away, as did Faf du Plessis, by the way, and said he had the game of the game of De Villiers waiting to unload. I don't know. This fella, if he spends a little bit of time with Ben Stokes and Ben Stokes gets the heart emojis, and he spends a bit of time with Faf and Faf gets the heart emojis, and NASA watches him on TV and NASA loves it. Jeez, I don't think me and you should be disagreeing.
The last player NASA got really excited about was Jos Buttler. Do you remember?
Yeah.
That was the last time. I remember in the press box, and I was talking to him about something he'd done, and he said, "Jarrod, everything you're saying is right. We can do heaps of analysis, but we don't even know what Jos Buttler can be yet." And you and I know that's not a real NASA thing to say.
No.
NASA's more like, let's settle down here. He's averaging 35 in red ball cricket, but it wasn't like that. It's really interesting. If you can warm Nasser Hussain's heart, what can't you do?
Precisely, yeah. So, I mean, he got Nasser Hussain talking in sound bites, inked in, nailed on. It was fantastic. It was brilliant to hear. But, I mean, we just, if we're going to crank in this last couple minutes, crank the hyperbole meter right as high as we want to crank it. You said he's got a little bit of KP going on there. Bang, let's have KP. Butler. Yeah, he's got a little bit of Butler going on because hits hard and straight and flips back over his shoulder. The path that he's taken is a little bit Joe Root. It's family cricketer, club, scholarship at a better school, whatever, with all those facilities, through the Yorkshire team, into the England setup. Yeah, so I think, I don't know if we want to close on this, he's probably just a mixture between KP, Joe Root, Jos Buttler, and AB de Villiers.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.